I've been tempted to write what happened to my family many times, but it seems far too unreal. We were not allowed to talk about this out of the house when I was a child, and my mother only told our house guests about our visitors when they experienced something in our house. Our childhood home was built in 1898. My parents bought the house in 1974 when I was only 6 months old. The house was very large and had been converted into a double. My grandmother moved into the upper level. Strange things began to happen shortly after my family moved in. My mother had her first experience one night after she sent my older sisters to bed. From her bedroom door, she could look out and see into the kitchen's hallway and into the bathroom. My family had only lived in the house less than a month when my mom saw a little blonde-haired girl walk into the bathroom. All of my sisters have very dark brown hair, and this was clearly a blonde-haired child. My mother panicked and yelled to the little girl, but the door shut. My mom jumped out of bed. In her mind, she was thinking that this little girl was a neighbor's child that my sisters must have snuck in the house. When she opened the door, there was nobody inside the room. My mother nicknamed the little girl Jessie, and I have no idea why. My mother had many experiences in the house and with the younger children, myself, my younger sister, and younger brother. When we were very small, it was as if we were playing with someone else. I don't remember this particular incident, but my mom did. But I do remember that in my oldest sister's bedroom in her closet, there was a paneled off section that led under a hallway steps to the second floor. I remember talking to someone that we called the lady under the stairs. I always thought that it was my mom or grandmother, but I later learned that that was not the case. When we told my mom about this, she would not let us play this game anymore. I do not remember being scared at all though. My younger sister and I would always go into our hallway and play with the lady on the stairs. I have very little recollection of this, and at the time, I would have been about 4 years old, and my sister would have been about 3. When we described the woman to my mother, she forbade us from being in the hallway alone. I never took the ghost stories to heart, and was very carefree as a child. I always felt safe. However, I did finally have a bizarre experience that I could not explain or rationalize away. My grandmother had a stroke when I was 15, and my mother gave my older sister's bedroom to my grandmother since it was on the first level and safer for her. She had no control over what she was saying and was rapidly deteriorating. My parents did not lay any ground rules for us kids that summer, as things were in havoc, and my brother and I had stayed up all night watching Nick at Night in the living room. I could see into my grandmother's room, and we also kept an eye out for her should she use the bathroom or want something to drink. I was just starting to doze off when I thought I saw someone in my grandmother's room. It was a blonde-haired girl who might have been 10 to 12. I have no idea the age. I thought I was just seeing things, or that I was really wiped out, and my mom's stories were starting to get to me. I walked out into our kitchen, and my oldest sister was eating a sandwich, and I told her what I saw. She laughed at me and told me I must have been dreaming. I thought maybe she was right, because I just never believed what my mom had been saying about the girl she had claimed seeing on several occasions. Now here's where I realized I was not a complete nutcase. I said before that the house was very big. Well, my grandmother started screaming, and my sister and I ran into the room. My grandmother was up and headed for the front door. She was screaming about fire and the little girl. We could barely make out what she was talking about, but she kept repeating the little girl said I was going to hurt the baby, and I have to go before I cause a fire. That was the most intelligible sentence that my grandma had said in over a month. My sister kept saying, "What little girl?" and my grandmother said clear as day, "The little blonde-haired girl." My grandmother was 72 years old and short of hearing. She was also 3 rooms away when I literally whispered this to my sister. We woke up my mom because we did not know what to do. My grandmother ran out of the house and refused to come back in. She stood on her porch. My parents took her to the hospital, and she was placed in a nursing home because even the mention of our house sent her into hysterics. The baby she was talking about is my younger brother, who is the baby in the family. My mom decided to turn the house into a one-family home again, and had us kids, there were 6 of us, do the work. We did not mind, as we wanted to help, and it was a good way for us not to think about my grandmother all the time. My younger sister and I would be the only 2 sharing a room, but that was fine with me, as we were very close and we were excited. Again, I was up and could not sleep, so I went up to the room that would be ours. It had been my grandmother's, and I was scraping wallpaper off the walls with a putty knife. We had started this project the night before, and I was bored, so I went up to get some work done. I was scraping the walls and had been doing so for about a half an hour, when I heard a funny noise sounding like the scraping noise I was making with the knife, but different. It's hard to explain. I thought someone was playing a trick on me, so I began to scrape the wall, and very quickly I stopped. However, the sound that I heard continued, and it was the sound of scraping, but it was coming from across the room. I don't know if whatever was in the room was mocking me or playing a game, but the scraping kept going on. Whoever or whatever did not care that I heard them. I screamed. I thought it was one of my older sisters. I ran down the front stairs and opened the door, and the house was completely quiet. Everyone was sound asleep, snoring. I woke up everyone in the house. I was terrified, and I never slept in that room. I would hear things in the house until I was 18 and moved out. As for our house restorations, my mother began working on the kitchen and back hallway that led to our attic. While doing so, she found where the house had burn marks and was scorched. My mother mentioned this to one of our neighbors, a woman who had lived on our street from the day she was born. In the early 1920s, our house had burnt very badly and had been rebuilt. At that time, it had been converted into a double. A little girl and her parents lost their lives in the fire. My other sisters had things happen to them too. One of my older sisters was looking out of the living room windows. Something grabbed her shoulder and called her name. One more thing. Please don't think I'm nuts, but I have not had this happen in any house or apartment I've lived in since. And one thing I did notice was that whatever was in the house was not frightening to me in my youth, but only became frightening when each of us hit a certain age. Why? I have no idea. This was also something I thought that was weird. This little girl was never visible upstairs, and the woman only was spotted downstairs once. The neighbor who was alive when the house caught on fire remembered that the little girl's name was Jessica. My mom had been calling her that for years, and had never known what the little girl's real name was, but had just called her that because it seemed right. I've been reading the stories on your site for a while now, and decided to share experience of my own. I'm afraid it's not particularly exciting or dramatic, but I feel it's a good example of the attitude you need to take when dealing with spirits. I've been told on more than one occasion, by people who claim psychic abilities, that there are spirits present in my house. This really comes as no huge shock, as the core of the house is a farmhouse that is over 120 years old. Although I've never seen a ghost myself, I'm familiar with the sort of chilled feeling that people describe when they are in the presence of spirits. It is not truly the same feeling as normal reaction to temperature, but something that seems more internal and comes and goes independently of environmental changes. I've very commonly experienced this sensation, usually beginning before someone else remarks about their perception of something otherworldly. Several years ago, one summer morning, I'd come home in the early morning from working the night shift. I was getting undressed for bed and placed my bedroom door in a 3/4 closed position that I usually keep in to provide some cross ventilation. Let me explain that my bedroom is a rectangular room, approximately 10 foot wide by 16 feet long. There's a set of double windows on the far end of the room. My bed is crossways in front of the windows with the head on the longer wall. The door was on the other end of the room, and due to irregularities from different additions to the house, there was an approximate 4-inch step down when entering the room from the hallway. At the time of this incident, there was no central air in the house, so the only cooling method was to open windows. As I was getting ready for bed, I saw the door swing shut, rather firmly from the 3/4 position. At first, I dismissed this as just being the breeze, as I was feeling a slightly chilled feeling on what was a rather warm morning. Even though I didn't really notice much in the way of the air current, I was very tired and somewhat groggy, and only wished to get to bed as soon as possible. I put my door back into the position I had it in, and went back to getting ready for bed. Almost immediately, the door swung shut again very firmly. Even though I really did not notice the breeze, The door swung quite freely on its hinges, and I did not think much of the fact that it kept shutting. I then took one of my work boots, the common style most everyone is familiar with that laces up about 9 inches above the ankle, and placed it with the toe section underneath the door and the heel towards the doorway, and repositioned the door to the 3/4 position I wanted it to be in. Moments later, the door dragged the boot across the carpeted floor and closed as far as it could with the boot in the way. Now at that point, I realized that there was certainly no breeze present that could exert that amount of force, and the chill I was experiencing was not the normal environmental kind, nor was it in any way cold enough that morning for me to be experiencing a normal chill. Now, I'm not a person who likes to have his sleep interfered with, nor do I particularly like to have my plans of any kind thwarted. Besides, all of my reading and conversations regarding the supernatural and hauntings have always indicated that you have to assert your rights to control your domain when challenged by spirits. With this in mind, I grabbed up a heavy, approximately 12-pound Thor hammer I had cast from aluminum years before in shop class, and placed the head of it underneath the door, with the handle sticking up between the door and the doorway. Stepping back, I then witnessed the door drag this heavy hammer, approximately 12 pounds, across the floor the same way I had my boot, until again, the door was as far shut as it could be without actually removing the hammer from underneath it. At that point, becoming somewhat angry, I took the hammer out from underneath the door, placed the door into a 2/3 closed position, slightly more open than I really wanted, and waited. Within seconds, the door started to shut again. At this point, I pointed at the door and said loudly and firmly, "No." The door stopped moving and stayed perfectly still. I stood there for a few moments longer watching the door, and it did not move again. I then said thank you and went on to bed. I think it's important for people to understand that in most cases of encountering a spirit in your home, you simply have to assert your right to be the master of your home. I can't promise that it will always be the complete answer in all cases, but I believe it to be the best way to begin with dealing with a disagreement with a spirit in your home. Many years ago, my family and I lived in a lovely Queen Anne-style home. We lived in it for 13 years, 11 of which we experienced paranormal phenomena. 2 years after we moved in, we had our first of many odd occurrences. My daughter was in the kitchen and I was upstairs when I heard her call out that the upstairs toilet must have overflowed because water was running down the outside of the staircase. I ran to the top of the stairs in bare feet, only to feel water on the surface of the carpeting. I looked over the top of the railing to assure that the toilet hadn't overflowed, and that was when I felt the wetness on my feet, but there were no water pipes in that part of the house. When I got down the stairs, I found water running in rivulets down the wooden molding. My daughter reached up to turn on the light under the stairway alcove, and as soon as she did, the water stopped. We had to wipe the trom down, and we never found any reason for that activity. Months later, while preparing for bed one night, I heard footsteps running down the attic stairs. The door crashed against the opposite wall, and then nothing. I was terrified thinking that someone was there. They would have to pass my room to get downstairs, but nothing happened. When we finally went to look, the door was against the wall. We even thought that maybe a ball had bounced down the stairs, sounding like footsteps, but there was nothing. Strangely, when we started to think our house had unseen guests, we were no longer frightened. As time passed, we had many more experiences. I heard a woman crying softly but pitifully. 2 of my daughters saw images of old-fashioned children dressed in long white nightgowns and mob caps. A visitor to my house saw the same thing and asked me who the little girl was. On another occasion, my nephew was spending the night and thought he saw me standing at the top of the stairs in a long white old-fashioned nightgown, and then supposedly I went down the stairs and didn't come back. My nephew was 16 at the time, and we hadn't told him about the house. My husband thought we were all crazy because he didn't believe in this sort of thing. My daughter came home late one night and was just lying in bed, going over her evening, and looked up to see a male figure suspended over the bed, and as she watched the image dissolve from the bottom up, as if it were sand falling. There were other things that happened there, although nothing dangerous, and finally, we sold the house and moved on. It was several years after we moved from the house that we met a family that had lived there years before we did and had very similar things happen to them, but they said their experiences were very frightening and mean-spirited. I sometimes think our guests moved in with us because from time to time, we still get very strange sensations in our present Victorian home. This is my own personal ghost story. This happened when I was about 12 years old, so keep in mind that 12 years have passed, but as long as I live, I will never forget the details. Here goes. I was spending the night with a good friend of mine, in a house that was extremely haunted. Stephanie lived in one of those houses that just seemed to be the epicenter of paranormal activity. Her aunt walked the basement steps, an unknown spirit lived in the attic, and there was a tree out back that just looking at it scared me to death. I'm really not entirely sure why the tree scared me so much, but it rocked me to the bone. It was large and had an ominous presence. Stephanie called it the witch tree, but really had no actual reason for doing so. But nevertheless, the tree's not my focus in the story. It just gives a little background information. We went to sleep that night, and about 2 a.m., I woke up with a start. I thought it was just because Steph and I had talked about ghost stories until we fell asleep, but then I had the feeling that I was being watched. I looked up and saw this large pair of blue eyes hovering over me. I know this sounds silly, but I'm dead serious. They just kept watching me. Maybe watching me is not the right word. They kept glaring at me, and all I could sense was evil. I felt so cold, and I couldn't wake Stephanie up. I thought I might have been dreaming, so I closed my eyes and laid there. I looked up every few minutes and the eyes were still there. I had no clue what to do to make them go away, so I just started praying to God, something I saw in a movie, and never opened my eyes that night again. I woke up in the morning and told Stephanie about them. She had never seen them before, but didn't doubt me. She of all people knew the history of her house. I went on with life as normal, forgetting about the eyes until about 2 months later, Stephanie came to me and said she talked with her little brother Aaron, who was 8. She said she didn't even mention the eyes to him, but one night they were talking about the house and he asked her if he had ever seen a large pair of blue eyes. She stopped dead in her tracks. Aaron said that to him the eyes were friendly and never glared at him. We just figured out that they saw me as a stranger and focused evil on me. I will never know for certain. All I know is that I never stayed in that house again. In addition to that story, my sister and I were out driving about 9 months ago. It was about 11 p.m. and we passed by Stephanie's old house. She no longer lived there, but I'm pretty sure that her father still did. I turned to Lauren, my sister, and said, "Look, La, there's that creepy house." Now, this next part will sound so bizarre, but I swear it is true. All of a sudden, a light shot up from the house, which was completely dark, and 2 other lights shot up from the other side of the road. We thought they might just be electrical charges. That was, of course, until they started chasing the car. We had to get the mail down the road until they disappeared. Do you have any idea what those lights might have been? Thank you for listening to my stories. Back in 1996, my Uncle Wayne passed away in a tragic auto accident on the interstate near Neenah, Wisconsin, between Appleton and Oshkosh. He had been pulling a load of sod with a small pickup truck that he borrowed from a coworker. The truck must have been too small to carry the load because the truck flip killed my uncle instantly. Needless to say, my father flew out to Wisconsin from our home in Pensacola, Florida, to attend the funeral of my youngest brother. My father is the oldest of 7 children. The story I'm about to tell comes from the mouth of my father. The afternoon before the day of the funeral, my father took his mother and father to the funeral parlor to finalize the arrangements. On the way back to my grandparents' home, my grandmother noticed that her family ring was missing a stone. The stone that was missing was my Uncle Wayne's birthstone. They looked everywhere for the stone and could not find it. Everyone kept saying it was Wayne's way of saying a final goodbye to his mother. The next day, the day of the funeral, everyone left my grandparents' house to go to the funeral except my Uncle Stan. Stan stayed behind to wait for that cousin that was running late. A few minutes later, Stan heard a car pull into the driveway. At the bottom of the driveway was a car that looked exactly like Wayne's, a green Spitfire. My Uncle Stan thought how strange it was that their cousin had a car exactly like Wayne's. His car was still parked outside his old apartment at the time. He looked out the window again and saw a man sitting in the driver's seat with a beard. My Uncle Wayne had a beard when he died. My Uncle Stan opened the door to walk outside, thinking it was their cousin, who also has a beard. When he opened the door, the car reversed out of the driveway and quickly drove away. A few minutes later, their cousins pulled up in a totally different car. My Uncle Stan was so shocked that he told everyone at the funeral about what happened. Since this time, no one else had been visited by my Uncle Wayne. A year ago, we bought an old Victorian house. The family matriarch had refused to let it be sold, although it was in a dismal condition. When she passed away, the family decided to sell, although it had been with them for 80 years. We began the serious process of renovation, but I was disturbed by the obvious presence of an old woman, dressed in pink, always in the same place, in the same room. I naturally assumed it was the family matriarch, Sophia. She was so unhappy and seemed displeased at the disturbance we were causing, so I called in a psychic friend of mine to help her move along. The psychic rang bells, chanted, burned, and we put lit candles in all the doorways and windows. The very next day, it appeared that Sophia had gracefully moved on. A year passed. We finished the renovation and were preparing to throw an open house party. The day before the party, a woman came into the house and announced that she had grown up there. She said she had been coming by to check on her progress, but had always been shy to come in. Something had drawn her courage up to come in on that day. We were very pleased and immediately invited her and her family to come to the open house the very next day. They all came. At one point, I couldn't resist, and I asked this woman if there had ever been ghosts in the house. "Oh yes," she replied. "My great-grandmother was so persistent, we had to call in a priest to exorcise her." Feeling confident, I then told her about Sophia. The woman began to tremble and cry. She said that her mother, Sophia, had always worn pink, and the room and place I described would have been between the beds in the children's room. Rest in peace, Sophia. Years ago, before I was born, my father was sleeping at the head of the bed, I believe, and my mother was at the foot by the window as there was no air conditioning and the light was out, room dark. Well, my mother said all of a sudden, she heard what she believed to be a woman at the head of the bed, jabbering away, could not understand her at all. My mother got terrified and pulled the cover up over her head, and when she did, this thing came right by her ear and just talked. She was unable to make out what the thing was saying. She jumped up and yelled and slept for a week with the ceiling light on. She asked, and someone told her that they believed the house we used to live in had been moved from another location. Another true story. My mom used to walk me to grade school about 6 blocks from the house, and she lost her house keys one day. Well, she traced her steps, even looked by the mailbox at the corner of her house, thinking that she laid them there. No keys. We lived upstairs, 16 feet up, and my dad was in front of the bedroom, and my mom was in my room laying next to me, and the strangest thing happened. All of a sudden, I had the most peaceful feeling. This is a feeling that's kinda hard to explain, but I'll do my best. So, someone I don't know. It could have been an angel or a dead relative, who knows, but it was right next to the bed on my side and said my name. I was not scared at all, but my mom heard it too and jumped up. I had so many questions, such as who are you, what are you doing, and how do you know me? But at the moment, the phone rang, and Sandy, who lived around the corner, was walking home from church on a Sunday and said, "I found your keys. They were by the mailbox." I know this writing is all over the place, and I'm so sorry if this was hard to understand, but I think you guys got the gist of it. These things I can't explain are occurrences of the afterlife, in my opinion. Phantom of Darkness is not available for human consumption. Because if he was, he'd probably be a cannibal. Well, he'd be a cannibalized victim. That's what he'd be. For external use only. Please understand that this is not what you expect when you find me in the jam. Jimmy Jam Jam, I'm in my pajama jams, jamming around to Little Man Man, whatever that means, guys. If you've taken Phantom of Darkness, ask Phantom of Darkness if Phantom of Darkness is right for you. I mean, doctor. I messed up. Oh, guys, it feels so good to be speaking with you. Oh my gosh, I meant to say doctor. If a doctor is right, no, ask, whatever, it doesn't even matter anymore, guys. No, seriously, it's truly a privilege to be able to read stories for you guys again and actually release a video of pretty lengthy content to you guys. I know it's still not quite 30 minutes, but who's counting anyway? 25 is good enough for us, right? Anyway, guys, I just wanted to give you a big shout out and say to everybody who supported the channel, thank you so much for getting me to 8K subscribers. Like, I really love your activity. That's the one thing I love about my channel. It may be really small, but at the same time, I see tons of comments because I know you guys want to talk to me and I want to hear from you too. It's not just us that's building the channel. It's the whole world that's bringing us together and creating a channel of epic proportions. No, seriously, guys. No, I really mean it. Like, seriously. I was having nightmares just like not being able to release a video, just thinking about this day, just hoping that Monday would come so I can release a video to you guys. And it was just a fantastic release for myself. And I bet you guys can hear the release in my voice. Like the tension is just easing. Like I sound a lot better than I did on last Monday's video or last Tuesday's, whatever it was. But seriously, guys, like you guys just mean so much to me. And I really appreciate it if you actually share this video and like it and subscribe. Because, you know, 10K is around the corner. That's my ultimate goal. And if you guys just share it on any social media platform, I really would appreciate it. You know, I sound preachy all the time, but seriously, guys, you know how much I mean to you, and like I'm so grateful. This is a privilege that I'm not taking for granted, and every time I upload, it's like something special to me, you know. I'm sharing my passions with you guys, and I really mean it from the bottom of my heart. Like I can't I can't be as passionate as I can on anything else, but YouTube, yes. And I'm gonna mess up, and I'm not even gonna edit that out because I've been editing so much anyway, so whatever. But seriously, guys, it feels good to say this and do another outro, but good night, good morning, and before I waste any more of your time, I'll see you in the next video, and I'll do better, and I'll do my best, and it will be underpants. Anyway, guys, that was my inspirational quote of the day. Thank you so much. Love you. Bye-bye.